Sorry about that, Nicole. Are you all ready?
Yes, ma'am, we are ready and we are live on YouTube.
All right, thank you. Okay, I call this special technical advisory committee meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Mr. Parsons, do you have anything you'd like to share about the virtual meetings?
No, ma'am. We're good to go.
Good to go. All right. Moving on, Ms. Mueller, would you mind calling roll call and certifying that we have a quorum?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. Let's start with Town of Ashland. Chair Amos.
Here.
Mr. Tucker. Chesterfield County, Ms. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Walker.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Mr. Kilduff. Hanover County, Mr. Vidunas.
Here.
Mr. Flagg. Henrico County, Ms. Meidler.
Here.
Mr. Yore. New Kent County, Vice Chair Leduc.
Here.
Powhatan County, Mr. Chardine.
Here.
Mr. Pompey. City of Richmond, Ms. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Bridewell. Capital Region Airport Commission, Mr. Rutledge. DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Here.
Mr. Sparks. GRTC, Ms. Torres.
Here.
Ms. Del Ross. Plan RVA, Mr. Parsons. And I think he has audio
Here.
problems. Perfect, thank you. Mr. Ariel.
Present.
Ride Finders, Ms. Tisdale. Mr. O'Keefe.
Here.
RMTA, Ms. Simmons. VDOT, Ms. McAdory.
Morning. Here.
Good morning. And Mr. Herman.
Here.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance. And Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Mueller. The next item on the agenda is consideration of amendments to the action meeting agenda. Does anyone have anything they would like to add or change with the agenda as presented? Okay, not hearing any. Do I have consensus to adopt the agenda? All aye.
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 Nay. Okay, moving on. The next item is open public comment period. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to speak? Or Mr. Parsons, did you receive any comments prior to this meeting that we should share?
We did not receive any comments, and I don't believe there's anyone with us this morning.
Thank you very much. So for the action item of the day, we're here to review the FY22, FY27 RSTP CMAQ draft allocations. I believe Mr. Bushing is going to present this to us.
Good morning. I wanted to go ahead and just give you a quick overview again, start with some of the same information we went over briefly at the last TAC meeting, just as a refresher, and then we can get the discussion started. So just to give you a little bit of context, the available allocations this year have been reduced by about 13% for RSTP and CMAQ. We received the numbers of what was available on February 25th. We presented the original draft to you on the 9th. The deadline for the draft SIP development is the 2nd of April, which essentially means we need to have our piece done by this week or early next week. So we are requesting that TAC make a recommendation on the programs today so that we can include them in the draft SIP for public comment. So for the CMAQ side, allocations were reduced by almost 6.9 million from what we had expected based on what was approved back in September, and that's 13.2%. For RSTP, the available allocations were reduced by 15.9 million or 12.6% from what we had expected based on the last round of approvals. So the process that we went through in developing the draft plans, we focused on preserving the existing projects rather than trying to get anything new in here. It was very tight, as you can see with the draft plans. We did also try to maintain a balance entry at reduced levels. That way we can accommodate any potential cost increases or hopefully in the future new projects as well. The funding was matched to the schedule that was in VDOT's records. So whatever was on file with VDOT, which should be the most recent schedule, we tried to match up with that so that the projects would have funding when it was needed. And delivery was prioritized over development. So if we had to make a choice between funding PE or construction, the money went to construction. So there was one significant change from what was sent out originally on the 9th. The Atlea Station Road Widening project was erroneously left off of the initial draft. Essentially, there was a no post to get started with PE. It looked like it was fully funded, but it isn't. And we had intended to fund it. It was in our plans for future commitments. So we went ahead and took the approach to use the balance entry from FY26 and 27 and reduce those slightly rather than adjusting any other projects at this point, since we were already sent out the original draft. So there's no other impacts to the other projects, but the balance entry is reduced for those years in RSTP. And those changes were included in the agenda packet and the draft plan that was sent out with the agenda packet. So overall for CMAQ, we kept all the projects on their current schedules. The out year reserves, what's in a balance entry, was reduced by 2.1 million. And we do have unfunded balance, but it's primarily for phases that are in the future years. So FY28, FY29. There was one project that had an increase of about 800,000 that hadn't requested additional funding from the TPO yet. So that could come up in a future cycle. But this is very manageable, not something that we expect to have any issues with. RSTP was much more complicated. There's a lot more projects and they're a lot more expensive. So we were able to keep all but one of the projects on the current schedule. The out year reserves were reduced significantly by 7.2 million. So that actually handled a lot of the reduction in funding. But we still do have quite a bit of unfunded balance. So for next phases, which would be in FY28, we have 18.2 million that's needed. There's 12.8 million for cost increases to projects which haven't been requested from the TPO, but might be. So these are potential increases that we might need to handle in future cycles. And then there was 3 million that was requested, which was not funded with this draft. So the project has increased in cost from the initial selection of 7.5, and it's now at 13.1. And so there was an additional request. We weren't able to fit that into the plan this cycle. And part of the reason was that it didn't appear that it would be fully funded even with that contribution. So that's another potential issue that we'll need to address with future cycles as well. So overall, you can see there's about 34 million in unfunded balance on projects that are in the RSTP plan. So the key discussion items today is essentially that balance entry and the unfunded balance. For the balance entry, we were able to maintain the percentages pretty much as normal. So starting at 0 in year 1 and ramping up to about 30%. So that's what we were able to do with CMAQ. For RSTP, we had to reduce the FY26 and FY27 down. So it's about 20%, I think it's 17.6% for 27. So it's a little bit less, but we are still maintaining a balance to be able to adjust as needed in the future. In terms of the unfunded balances, as I mentioned with CMAQ, staff believes it's very manageable. We can handle it just through the normal process like we normally would. RSTP is a little bit more complicated. That 18.2 million for next phases is essentially, we're expecting about 19 million next year. So it's pretty much the entire pot is what we would expect. So it's really exceeding what we would normally allocate with a balance entry. So the recommendation in the staff report was that TAC consider limiting the RSTP applications in the fall to only current projects rather than accepting new applications. We don't need to take any action on this today. This is just a recommendation. We wanted to throw it out there so you have time to think through it before we get to that. The action we are requesting today is to provide any revisions to the draft allocations plans as presented and provide a recommendation to the policy board on adopting those plans. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Miles. I'm guessing we're going to have a few questions and or comments. Is there anyone who would like to go first?
This is Sharon with Henrico. If I may go first, I'll start.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone be able to explain where the federal funds went? Because they were here in September 2020. And so people submitted applications, and now in February, it's not here. So I just thought it was like a different pot of money since they were federal funds, and was hoping somebody could expand on what happened.
This is Liz with VDOT. I can tell you it is federal money, but it's allocated to states by revenue projections. It's all revenue based, and it's sub-allocated down to the districts and whatnot, or the MPO regional areas. So it basically boils down to a reduction in revenue projections, which is, I think, I don't have the backup scientifically, I don't have the data, but we redid it in September because we knew there were going to be impacts to COVID. And then when it was redone, when we finally got the final numbers, there was a much bigger impact due to COVID. Does that help answer that?
I think that's the best we can answer at this time, but yes, thank you, Liz.
I can actually, Sharon, we have some emails I can dig back through and try to get you, I can send that to Miles to get a summary of what changes happened and why.
Okay.
I just don't have that information right in front of me.
No,
I'll get
no.
that to Miles.
All right, I appreciate the explanation, Liz. Thanks.
Good question, Sharon. Did you have anything else yet? I'll put you on hold. You can always come back. Anyone
Thanks.
else? Well, Miles, I'm not.
Oh,
Very
I've got
much.
something.
Thank you, Barb. I was going to ask if you did. Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, you said in RSTP one project had a shortfall that you weren't able to address, but you think you'll be, we'll think about it next round.
Yes.
What project was that?
Sure. So that's the Mayo Bridge project. So the project, when it was initially selected, was about $7.5 million was the estimated cost. The city's most recent estimate that they submitted in the application was 13.1. In the dashboard on VDOT's side, they show, I think it's 18.4 or something like that. So there's a lot of ambiguity in terms of what the total cost is going to be still. And so
Yeah.
the plan is to approach that as we get a little bit more clarification, as the funding approach gets a little bit more refined. We can see exactly what shortfall we need to address from the MPO side. I know the city's been pursuing several other revenue sources as well. So I think it's one that we may have a little bit more time to figure out.
Yeah. We do it that way frequently also.
Thank you, Barb. Did anyone else have any questions or comments? Miles, I don't have any questions on the action you're requesting today, and I apologize if you all already talked about the scoring and priorities and such at the last meeting, which I missed the first part of. But I would just like to reiterate that if we did have funds, I have issues with how the projects were scored and rated, and I look forward to getting an update and hearing how that's going to change for the next cycle. You don't have to say anything, but just had to get that out there. Okay, anything else? Or if there is no other comment, what we're being asked to do is to provide a recommendation on the resolution that was in our packet, that the TPO approves the allocation of RSTP and CMAQ funds as presented this morning. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the CMAQ and RSDP FY22-27 allocations.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Joe, was that Joe?
Yes.
Thank you. So I have a motion by Barb Smith and a second by Joe Vidunas to recommend to the TPO approval of the allocations as presented. Was there any other additional discussion before we call for the vote? Okay, Ms. Mueller, could you call the vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Town of Ashland, Chair Amos.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Hootland County, Mr. Coleman.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Vidunas.
Aye.
Henrico County, Ms. Meidler.
Aye.
New Kent County, Vice Chair LeDuc.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Chardine.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Ms. Clark.
Aye.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky.
Aye.
GRTC, Ms. Torres.
Aye.
Plan RVA, Mr. Parsons.
Aye.
Ride Finders, Mr. O'Keefe.
Aye.
And VDOT, Ms. McAdory.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for item 3.
Thank you, Ms. Mueller. Are there any TAC comments?
I actually have one.
Go ahead, Ms. McAdory.
I just got word that the spring public hearing for the SYIP for Richmond District is going to be tentatively scheduled for May 12th at 4 p.m. It's going to be virtual. Again, that's tentative, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to be. So May 12th at 4 p.m. We'll obviously get more formal word out, but that's just hot off the press.
Thank you. Anything else to share?
Madam Chair, this is Dirona.
Go ahead, Dirona.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to support your comment in regard to the prioritization. And just looking back over the past and future allocations of CMAQ and RSTP, you know, Richmond has seen a variation, no more than probably like 16% of each of those pot of funds, while other localities have seen upwards of, in some cases, 40% of the funding when you're looking at it, and over time it kind of switches between some of the counties. And so I do ask that we continue to look at how we are prioritizing the projects. And then just for clarification, Madam Chair, I do think that what they said at the beginning of the meeting was that even for the next cycle, there would be no new projects being prioritized, and they would just be simply funding the existing. So I just wanted to make that note to you as you look to the process of when it will be happening again.
That's an excellent point, and I understand that. For me, it's more of a principle of the review of the applications and the ranking. I understand that even if our project scores well, we may not get funding, but I just feel like there could be a more fair review of applications. But thank you very much for your comments. Any other comments? Okay, well, our next meeting is our regular meeting on April 13th, and I believe we are now ready to adjourn. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a great weekend.